Welcome. I'm Neil Leary, Director of the Center for Sustainability Education at Dickinson College. Thank you for joining us for the first in a series of 3 community forums on climate action planning. The forum is being recorded. We will hear this evening from 3 speakers: Heidi Kunka of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, Professor John Dernbach of Widener University, and County Commissioner Jean Foschi. Following the speakers, we'll have some time for questions and answers, and you can type questions into the Q&A window at any time during the event. You'll see that at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will hold off on answering questions until speakers have finished with their prepared remarks, except for one of our speakers, John Dernbach, will be leaving us a bit early, just before 7 o'clock. And so after John speaks, we will take 1 or 2 questions that are specifically for John at that time. And then we'll hear from Jean and then do the rest of the questions after that. The forums, the series of forums, they're sponsored and organized by community groups in Cumberland Valley. They include the Cumberland Conservation Collaborative, the South Mountain Partnership, the Cumberland County Planning Department, Shippensburg University Center for Land Use and Sustainability, Dickinson College's Center for Sustainability Education, the Yellow Breeches Watershed Association, and the Borough of Carlisle. Climate change is happening. It's impacting our health, our safety, our farms, forests, water resources, and more. It's growing in severity, and it poses grave risks for our future. We can, with concerted action, constrain climate change. We can reduce the risks, and we can protect those who are most vulnerable from harm. While many of us recognize that actions are needed and just essential at national and international levels, it's less widely understood that local governments and communities also have critical roles to play. And that's the focus of all of our forums on climate change, is on local action. Through the community forums, we hope to motivate local governments, community organizations, local institutions and businesses, and residents of our communities. We're hoping to motivate them and mobilize them to take action on climate change. We want to encourage actions that are effective at reducing climate change risks, but we want those actions to also advance equity in our communities, create and support good jobs, and enable a robust regional economy that will meet all of our needs. In tonight's forum, Local Governance Setting the Stage, we will examine what local governments are doing and what they can do about climate change. We'll learn about Pennsylvania's Climate Action Plan and about support that's available from DEP to assist county and municipal governments to take action as well. We'll be learning about Cumberland County's commitment to climate change mitigation and also the county's plans to establish a climate change task force. The second forum in the series, Municipal Rules Where Real Action Happens, will delve into details of how local governments and citizens can take action on climate change, and we'll be drawing on Carlisle's new initiative as an example. That forum is planned for the evening of December 8th. The third forum, Schools Where Ideas Take Root, is planned for February 2nd and will address ways that schools from kindergarten through high school, college, and universities, how can they raise climate literacy, demonstrate effective climate solutions, as well as assist their communities in transitioning to be low carbon and climate resilient. For this evening, we're fortunate to have 3 excellent speakers. Heidi Kunka is an energy program specialist with the state's Department of Environmental Protection. She currently assists in managing all aspects of the Pennsylvania Climate Change Act, including the PA Climate Impacts Assessment, the State Climate Action Plan, annual greenhouse gas inventories, and the Climate Change Advisory Council. Our second speaker, John Dernbach, is Commonwealth Professor of Environmental Law and Sustainability at Widener University in Harrisburg, where he also directs their Environmental Law and Sustainability Center. John has published extensively on legal issues of climate change and sustainable development, and he's the co-editor of the recently published book, Legal Pathways to Deep Decarbonization in the United States. Finally, Jean Foschi is serving her first term with the Cumberland County Board of Commissioners as Vice Chair. She's the commissioner liaison to the County Planning Commission and alternate to the Farmland Preservation Board. Jean has experience in banking, corporate paralegal work, and the restaurant industry. She's a 20-year resident of Cumberland County and resides in Upper Allen Township with her husband and 2 children. As you listen to our speakers this evening, bear in mind the goals of our climate action planning forums. Specifically, we ask and encourage each of us to do a number of things. First, continue to educate ourselves and others, learn about climate change risks, learn about climate change solutions. Second, have conversations with family members, neighbors, coworkers, and others about what we can and what we should do about climate change. Third, advocate for action. Advocate for climate solutions by your township or borough, by the county, and at your place of work. And finally, get involved and participate. Carlisle is inviting residents to participate in helping to develop the borough's climate action plan. Cumberland County will likely do the same thing in coming months. We need your active involvement if we're going to be successful in combating climate change. Now, please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Heidi Kunka.
All right, thanks so much, Neil. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for having me this evening. My PowerPoint will magically display on the screen in a few moments. I believe Elizabeth is going to be sharing that in a second. So I work in the Energy Programs Office at Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. We are a non-regulatory office. We work to promote energy efficiency, renewable energy, alternative fuels and vehicles, energy assurance, and then climate change is the umbrella under which all of those initiatives and programs fall. Elizabeth, do you want me to just share my PowerPoint?
If you would, please. I'm trying to work out a technical issue here.
Okay, hold on one sec. Up my screen, and here it is. Okay. Can you see my screen? Hopefully. All right. I think we've got it up there now. Great. So today I'm going to be touching on what the state is doing to lead with climate change and what local governments in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania are currently doing as well. In the absence of federal leadership on climate action, states and local governments all across the country are taking action and making commitments to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to the climate impacts that we're already seeing. So the Energy Programs Office at DEP is tasked with the following items that you see on this screen by Act 70 of 2008. So we have had a Climate Change Act since 2008. Ever since then, we have been issuing a climate impacts assessment once every 3 years, a climate action plan for the whole Commonwealth, not just state agencies, but all of the Commonwealth, once every 3 years. We develop an annual inventory of our greenhouse gas emissions. And then we also administer and manage a climate change advisory committee that meets once every other month. They are external stakeholders to the department, and they advise us on how to move forward with climate change and climate action in the Commonwealth. Those meetings are open to the public. The next one is next Tuesday, actually. It begins at 9 a.m. And you can go to our DEP Climate Change website and click on CCAC, or Climate Change Advisory Committee, to tune into that webinar next Tuesday if you are interested. So the Climate Impacts Assessment from 2015 covered some of the basics of the impacts that we are going to be seeing here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And to sum those up really quickly, it's going to get warmer and it's going to get wetter in the Commonwealth. You can see the stats here. I know that WGAL News even said at the end of this past summer, it was the warmest summer on record for South Central Pennsylvania. So that's the Cumberland Valley. We had more 90+ degree days, and we're going to see 100+ degree days, an increase of those, especially in major cities. And then sadly, that the winter increase in precipitation that you see at the bottom is not going to be in the form of snow. It will be in the form of rain. We'll see snow every now and then and still get blizzards, but snow will not cover the ground for as long as it used to. A team of Penn State researchers is who we typically contract with to do our climate impacts assessment. And I've seen them present a really neat map on how, yeah, especially Southeast PA, where I'm originally from, we'll be seeing less snow coverage. And our health, there will be impacts to our health. And mostly they will be negative. You do see here there'll be a decrease in mortality rates from cold-related stress because we'll have less extreme cold. But in the summertime, we're going to have higher temperatures, and that's just going to exacerbate the air pollution that we already have in the Commonwealth, such as ground level ozone issues. Public health is actually the #1 way to get the public to care about taking action on climate change, because we all care about our health. And there's actually a really neat video that was just released from the Attorney General of Massachusetts. It's a 6-minute video, and it interviews doctors across the country on how they believe that climate change is the #1 public health issue of the 21st century. COVID is our short term. It doesn't seem short while we're in it. It's lasted for a while here this year, and it's going to last into next year. But eventually we will get on the other side of COVID and we will conquer it. But climate change is here to stay. The Industrial Revolution happened years ago, and all those fossil fuels and the greenhouse gas emissions from those are already in our atmosphere. And so we need to start dealing with the impacts that we're already seeing, especially such as flooding in the Commonwealth. So sectors that we're going to see impacts to, Pennsylvania dairy production is going to be negatively affected. I will touch on that a little more in the next slide, but that's because cows are heat sensitive animals. We may see a mass movement of poultry and hog production northward to our states. Typically, that production is done in southern states, but these two kinds of livestock production requires a lot of air conditioning, cooling for these animals because they're also heat sensitive. So we could see that move northward because relatively speaking, our temperatures won't be as hot as down south. And then sadly for skiers like myself, downhill ski and snowboard resorts are not expected to remain financially viable past mid-century. I've already been traveling north to do a lot of my skiing in Vermont and New York State. And impacts on trout fishing, especially in southeastern and northwestern Pennsylvania, because they require cool waters. So this is a way to also get people to care about climate change when it's going to impact our ability to recreate. The 2020 Climate Impacts Assessment came out earlier this year, and it expanded on those earlier statements I made about the dairy industry and the hog and poultry industry. Basically, we're expecting that the poultry inventory could more than double in size in the Commonwealth. And that's going to have impacts on our water quality in the Commonwealth. Our nitrogen and phosphorus levels in our rivers. Right outside my door is the Susquehanna River, which is part of the Chesapeake Bay, our nation's greatest estuary. There's going to be decreased effectiveness of best management practices that we use to deal with stormwater, we're going to have to make some adjustments to best management practice design and location. And then finally, we focused on resilience of Pennsylvania's critical infrastructure to extreme weather. So flooding appears to have the greatest potential future impact on infrastructure in the Commonwealth. Large portions of energy and transportation infrastructure is potentially susceptible to flood damage in the Commonwealth. And Southwest PA actually has increased issues with landslides now as a result of all the flooding and extreme rain we're getting. And this will not be all doom and gloom, my presentation, I promise. There'll be positive parts at the end about how you can take action. So this is our greenhouse gas inventory for the Commonwealth. You can see electricity production is where our second highest category for greenhouse gas emissions. Our largest is actually industrial. And the industrial sector actually includes greenhouse gas emissions from coal mining and natural gas production. So it's not just what's coming out of the smokestacks at manufacturing plants. And if you look at this pie chart in a different way, if you look at the residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation pieces of the pie, and you add those together, that is 66% of our greenhouse gas emissions in the Commonwealth come from energy consumption. So that is where we really need to take to really focus on, is reducing our energy consumption in our buildings, our transportation, and our industries. Climate action plan. So first you have a greenhouse gas inventory because you can't manage what you don't measure. And then you take that greenhouse gas inventory and you develop a climate action plan. So this is a picture of the cover page of our 2018 climate action plan, which is available on our DEP climate change webpage. It's a very large document, but we also have a shorter booklet version for the public as well. But basically the goals are to minimize disruptions to our citizens, economy, and environment from climate change, to adapt to those impacts we're already seeing, and to maintain cost effectiveness with our actions and strategies. Here are our greenhouse gas reduction targets for the Commonwealth, visually represented. And at the bottom, you can see those targets stated. So 26% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2025 and 80% reduction by 2050. These goals are in line with the Paris Accord, and they were set forth in Governor Wolf's first executive order of his second term last January. It was the first ever greenhouse gas reduction goal set for the Commonwealth. So on this slide, you will see the 19 strategies that our climate action plan identifies for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. You'll see energy efficiency front and center on here, renewable energy in the form of solar farms, that's utility scale, and also distributed energy, which is on your buildings, solar on your buildings. Sustainable transportation via mass transit and also individual electric vehicles. Agricultural best practices such as no-till farming, stormwater best management practices such as green infrastructure, rain gardens, vegetated swales, green roofs. Emergency preparedness is key to deal with all the flooding that we're going to see. And then leading by example in Commonwealth and local government practices and assets. So that's why I'm here today to share with you how the state is leading by example and also how we're supporting local governments in doing the same. Throughout the Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan, not the booklet version, but the bigger version, I actually really like how the plan has these call out boxes. The turquoise boxes that you'll see are what businesses can do to take action. And then the royal blue boxes are what residents can do to take action. So I invite you to take a look at those actions. And as far as how else the state government is leading by example when it comes to climate change, besides our impacts assessment, inventory, and climate action plan, I mentioned Governor Wolf's Executive Order 2019-01 that set our first ever greenhouse gas reduction goal for the Commonwealth, but it also directed the formation of the Green Gov Council. So we have 2 staff that work full-time on promoting sustainability, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and electric vehicles and high-performance buildings in state agencies. So these were the goals set forth by that executive order. And we are slowly but surely working towards meeting these goals. Actually, bullet number 2 has already been met. We already procure 40% of the Commonwealth's annual electricity use via renewable energy credits, or RECs. Some of you may have heard of RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So last year, Governor Wolf had another executive order focused on climate change, and that executive order called for Pennsylvania to join RGGI, which is a cap and trade system for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the region. So once Pennsylvania formally joins by January of 2022, which is when it's expected to happen, all states from Virginia up through Maine will be trading carbon allowances to reduce the overall greenhouse gas emissions from electric power plants. This is just for electric power plants. And if you're not familiar with cap and trade, remember the term acid rain? This is how we solved the acid rain problem, by cap and trade, by setting a regional cap on emissions from power plants and then trading allowances. Those electric power plants can trade allowances. And this is actually a step above cap and trade, because it's going to be a cap and invest program where all the proceeds from the auctions of those carbon credits will go to support energy efficiency and renewable energy programs in the Commonwealth of PA. So how are we supporting local governments in taking climate action? Well, kudos to Carlisle Borough and Cumberland County for being participants in our local climate action program, or LCAP, the acronym we use for it. So we use federal money to pay a contractor to train student and local government teams on how to develop greenhouse gas inventories and climate action plans. Last year we had 20 local governments participate, and this year we have 21 local governments participating. And that is a link right there to our LCAP program webpage that shows all the resources from this particular program. And I do want to give a shout out to Don Brown of Widener Law School. I know we have John Dernbach presenting after me. Don Brown inspired the formation of this program. So I sat down with him. He was the first person I sat down with, and I sat down with him for over an hour, grilling him with questions on how to shape this program, and he gave me a lot of great advice. So thank you. Local Climate Action Program. So this is just a visual representation of this great partnership model. So we receive funding from U.S. Department of Energy that goes to DEP, and we use that to pay ICLEI USA, our training contractor, who trains the student local government teams via one-on-one technical assistance and also live webinars. And then there's the connection between the higher ed institutions and the local governments as well. And here's our timeline. So we started this work in July of this year for the current cohort. First webinar was held in August. And by the end of this year, greenhouse gas inventories will be completed. And then in the spring, we will begin the climate action planning process. And part of that process is going to be stakeholder and community engagement. So I know that this training series is part of that stakeholder and community engagement, because we want all of you to be involved and have a say in the actions and strategies put forth in your climate action plan. And here's a list of our current participants. I highlighted in yellow all of those municipalities that are located in South Central Pennsylvania. So we do have our state capital participating this year as well, which is very exciting. And we have representation from all over the state. And then here are our academic institutions that are providing students. I work with college advisors like Tim Hawkins at Shippensburg and Neil Leary, who help select students for me, and they are absolutely clutch in the success of this program. And they think of great ways to expand the program and also give additional assignments to their students too. So, of course, I highlighted Dickinson and Shippensburg on this slide. And so here's just a picture of the final product from one of our participants from last year's program. Bellefonte Borough was a Shining Star participant last year. They actually just finalized their climate action plan. The end product of the year-long program is a draft climate action plan, and then it's finalized by having the local governing body adopt or approve that document. So as you can see here, the greenhouse gas inventory for Bellefonte shows that residential buildings, then commercial, and then transportation are responsible for the majority of greenhouse gas emissions. And I will tell you that that is what we are seeing for all the local governments that are participating. It's those three top sectors that are responsible. Sometimes it's transportation higher or commercial higher than residential, they're flipped, but it's all three of those are the main sectors that are responsible for greenhouse gas emissions. And here is the cover page of our local climate action plan template that our local governments use to formulate their actions and strategies. And then this is my last slide. So like I said, I shared with you the LCAP webpage that we have. It has all of the recorded training webinars from last year's cohort on there, as well as all of our other materials, the data request forms that you send to utilities, and a climate action plan template that I just showed the cover of. And new this year, if there are any municipalities in Cumberland County or anyone on the call that knows of another municipality outside of Cumberland County that wants to start taking action on climate change, even though the formal cohort is underway, we have money set aside for free ICLEI subscriptions. So what you can do is use all the tools and resources and the recorded training webinars on our LCAP webpage, and we're going to get you access to the greenhouse gas inventory tool called ClearPath that our training contractor uses. And so you'll get access to ClearPath and then also access to ICLEI for technical assistance. So please let me know and contact me if anyone is interested in participating. You can start at any time and go at your own pace using the free ICLEI subscription. And thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Heidi. That was a great job. Thanks for sharing this information about what's happening at the state level and DEP's role in that, and the ways in which you are supporting, assisting local governments across the Commonwealth in, thinking hard about, what are our emissions, where are they coming from, and what kinds of actions can we be taking. So now we're going to hear from John Dernbach, Professor John Dernbach, about local government and its important role in climate change action. John?
Well, thank you, Neil, and thank you all for participating in this tonight. I'm well aware that you all have other things to do or other things that you can do, and this is a terribly important problem. It's also provides some really interesting opportunities. And what I want to do, I think, before I start is I want to reflect a little bit on what Heidi talked to you about and what I'm going to share with you. If you're coming into this issue cold, that is about what you basically are thinking about is the way this is playing out, for example, in the national election, or sort of the contrast between political parties at the national level, you begin to think that what's really happening here is that there's this issue at the national level about whether we can move forward or not. And if nothing moves forward at the national level, then nothing can happen. Um, and what I want to encourage you to think about, if you are perceiving reality that way, is that that's really not true at all. There's a great deal that both state and local governments have been doing, and they've been doing it for actually a couple of decades, with more and more intensity and sophistication, really, with each passing year. The other thing, if you're coming again somewhat cold to this issue, is you can begin to believe that there's really not a lot of information out there about any of this, because, or excuse me, that there's some science out there, and there's some people who are saying no to it, but beyond that, you may not be all that clear about what solutions exist and what measures other local governments have taken. And what I want to encourage you to think about, because I encourage my students in a class that I teach, to think about this every single year, is that there's way, way more information, and way more opportunities than you might otherwise imagine. So what I intend to do with my presentation tonight is talk about the importance of local government in combating climate change. And I'm going to go through the points that were made in your flyer because I believe in truth in advertising. And I want to respond to the reasons that you came to this. So next slide, please. So a starting point, the first question I was asked to answer was, what is a greenhouse gas inventory? And you heard Heidi talk about these inventories, and I think it's worthwhile sort of stepping back a little bit and understanding what's going on. In any particular municipality, as Heidi indicated, you've got a mix of different sources, and the variations, there are some variations as you move from municipality to municipality. And the idea is to do a kind of formal study about where greenhouse gas emissions are coming from in your particular municipality. Um, and typically what they will show is sources. Often, as Heidi indicated, they give you types of sources like residential or transportation. One other important type of source, and I've seen this in the city of Lancaster, um, is in Lancaster, there's a lot of interest in, well, what greenhouse gases does local government produce? Those are the greenhouse gases that are most easily, in some ways, controlled without a lot of regulation and so forth, because these are measures that you can take internally. And it turns out that their sewage treatment plant and their utilities are a lot of the major are their major source of greenhouse gas emissions. And the idea is to figure out how much emissions come from each of these sources. Um, there's nothing particularly unusual or fancy about this at the local level. The EPA publishes an inventory just like this every year, and has since about 1992 under a federal statute. It continues to publish an annual inventory of greenhouse gases and sinks during the Trump administration, and you can Google for it and find it. Pennsylvania also publishes such an inventory. Heidi said annually, and that's fine. The most recent one was in 2020. What I've done here, by the way, is instead of showing links, I tried something fancy, and that is that I put hot links into the text of the PowerPoint. And so if you want the links, you can email me afterwards, or email the sponsors of this event for my PowerPoint slides, and I'll send them to you. Next slide, please. So what do you use this inventory for? For one thing, you get a baseline for this. I'm not going to go through each of these points, but I think a couple things are worth emphasizing. You get some idea of what the emissions actually are, um, and what that's good for, as I indicated, is figuring out what your priorities are going to be. Because if the reports are done more than once, and at the state and national level they enable you to track emissions trends. What we're seeing nationally is an increase in transportation emissions over the last number of years, although COVID has changed that to some degree. This is also really, really good a way of communicating with stakeholders, because you can talk to stakeholders, and the industry stakeholders, the folks that are involved in transportation, and it gives you a common factual database to look at. It also gives you a point of departure for developing mitigation strategies and policies, and a way over time of figuring out whether you're making any progress in meeting your greenhouse gas emission goals. So those are some of the values that an inventory has. It turns out to be a fairly central thing. Um, and for those of you who want to like just jump in and do something, I get that. All I'm doing here is emphasizing the value of having an overall understanding, if you can, and to the extent you can, of where emissions are coming from in your particular municipality. Next slide, please. So one of the challenges, and Heidi alluded to this, is you might say, well, okay, I'm in, I don't know, Maple Leaf Township. I'm just making up a municipality, and we don't know how to do this. Heidi alluded to, and that's the bottom line on my slide, a program that DEP has to assist local governments to prepare these inventories. And what I would share with you is that there are other sources of information about how to do these inventories. EPA has one. Again, you might say, well, Trump, really? And the answer is yes. I was at the website today, and there's a local greenhouse gas inventory tool that they display, and the website was updated earlier this year. ICLEI, which Heidi alluded to, has developed several relevant tools. You can find them as well. So if you're asking the question, well, how do we do this? This seems complicated. This road, people have gone down this road before, and technical resources are available to help you with this. And so even if you're not able to participate in DEP's program for whatever reason, there are still opportunities you have to get this kind of assistance. Next slide, please. So why do local climate action plans matter? One of the questions, I think, again, if you're thinking about this in terms of at the national level, it's really easy to say, well, okay, this is how the world works in my head. There's an international agreement to which the United States is a party. It's called the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The United States actually submitted articles of ratification for that treaty back in 1994 under the first Bush administration. We were the fourth, actually might have been in 1992. We were the fourth country in the world to join the climate treaty. And we are famously not part of the Kyoto Protocol, and we are famously not part of the Paris Agreement. But way back in time, we ratified the UN Climate Treaty, and we're still a party to that treaty. And so if you think about this in international terms, it's easy to say the United States, China, Germany, Japan, and so forth, and say, well, Western Europe and Russia and so forth, and say, well, if you're not doing something at the national level, nothing really matters. And what I would assert to you is that local climate action plans matter a great deal on an individual level, but also they matter when you add them all up. But I want to try and provide a little bit of qualitative and some quantitative information to support that. Next slide, please. So why do local governments matter? A lot of the data that is at the top half of this slide point in a single direction. Municipalities consume a lot of energy. They contribute a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And there are also a lot of them located along coastlines. Now, we're not in central Pennsylvania, we're not thinking about that too much, but that puts them at increasing risks of sea level rise and all the rest of that. But, and here's what I would add, is that beyond that, at the local government level, there's a level of responsiveness to local folks, to businesses, to residents and institutions that you may not get as much of at the national level, and you may not get as much of at the state level. And beyond that, local governments are often the first to experience and identify particular trends. And I want to provide two examples of that come out of a class that I teach. Every year for the past half dozen years, I've taught a sustainability class that is organized around the idea of having students draft model ordinances for local governments on various sustainability topics. And a lot of them involve climate change. And over the years, what we've done is worked with real local governments, the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the State Association of Boroughs, the Tri-County Planning Commission, Susquehanna Township. This year, thanks to Joel Hicks and Neil Leary, we've added the Borough of Carlisle. We've also added Swatara Township this year. And there's a couple of things that are interesting to me when you talk to local government folks about what they need ordinances for. And one of the things that comes up again and again, pretty much every year, is stormwater is increasingly a problem. It's a liability issue under federal environmental law, but it's also a cost issue and it's a damage issue. And local governments are experiencing that in very direct and immediate ways and are looking for ways to respond to that. COVID is also another interesting example. When we gathered this last summer to figure out what ordinances my local government friends wanted the students to draft, or excuse me, what topics my local government friends wanted students to draft ordinances for, a lot of them talked about COVID. And how does that hook up to this? Well, here's a couple of examples. One of the things that's happening, and local governments are seeing this almost immediately, um, is there's been a withdrawal of interest in, or a lowering of interest in, commercial office space, thanks to COVID. And it's preceded to some degree by all the internet shopping and whatnot that has been going on, but COVID really pushed it hard. And so one of the ordinances that my students is drafting this year is about about adaptive reuse of commercial office space. We're also talking about changes in ordinances that would allow for more outdoor dining, in maybe some of it in streets and in parking lots and other places where local zoning ordinances would not now allow it. And so with stormwater from climate change, because you're getting more precipitation events and bigger precipitation events, as Heidi pointed out, in COVID, you have two examples of where local governments are often the first to experience and identify trends. Heidi mentioned Don Brown. I got a lot of the information on this slide and a lot of the ideas in this slide from a presentation he made, Benjamin Brown, his son. And so I thank Ben for that. Next slide, please. So one of the other things, if you think about this as, again, if the model in your head is the federal government has to do something, or else we're in a bad place. There's a lot of truth to that, and I get that. But even if the federal government had played a really aggressive role in addressing climate change, and did everything that you might want the federal government to do on climate change, I would assert to you that there are some things that the federal government is probably not going to reach, that have to be dealt with and that are best dealt with at the local level. And you can see a list of those. And I'm not, again, going to walk you through each and every one of those points, but imagine federal government doing zoning. I don't think so. Federal government doing local land use plans. Again, I don't think so. Federal government involved in how we do solid waste and recyclables collection. That's not going to happen. And electric vehicle charging stations, you can help set those up at the local level. There's lots of things that local governments can do on some of these other topics, and I'll point those out in a bit. So the thing to keep in mind here is not just that there's a big opportunity from the standpoint of the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that come from within local government boundaries, but beyond that, there are some things that only local governments can do, or only do effectively. Next slide, please. So one of the things that to talk about here is sort of what would be a good starting point in terms of specific actions that local governments can take. And one starting point here is to set a greenhouse gas reduction goal. Goals are great. Heidi talked about goals, but what I want to add to what Heidi said is the value of goals over a long period of time. And I'll take as a point of departure my experience long ago at the Department of Environmental Resources when we were drafting what is now Act 101, the state's mandatory recycling law. And the question was, what goal were we going to set? And back in 1986, or 7 rather, when we first started discussing a goal, we said, well, maybe we can get to 10% by 1997, a 10% recycling rate by 1997. And the environmental groups said to us, no, you can do better than that. And so we agreed to amend the legislation for a 25% recycling rate. Well, what that goal did is it provided something around which local governments, the private sector, the public, everybody got involved. They were all thinking about what can I do to contribute to that goal? And we achieved that goal. And then a few years later, they set a more stringent goal And since that time, the DEP has not set a new goal. We've begun to talk about zero waste instead of percentages of recycling and so forth. But I would argue that, and this is a little bit off the point, but not too far off the point, that the recycling program in Pennsylvania could benefit from a new goal. Just like I would argue that if you're going to be working on local action for greenhouse gas reductions, that there's value in setting some kind of goal. A lot of local governments have done that, and I think it would have the same kind of effect as it did with the recycling law. Next slide, please. So Neil mentioned at the very beginning in his introduction that I've edited a book called Legal Pathways to Deep Decarbonization in the United States. And I get that that's not the sexiest title that you could come up with. But what we wanted to do, and I did this with Michael Gerard at Columbia Law School, and what we did is we asked about 60 other people from around the country, mostly lawyers, over the course of 35 chapters on very specific pieces of the greenhouse gas reduction issue to identify particular recommendations and that could be done by the federal government, by state and local governments, and also by the private sector. And what we did when we published this book, we did it in two forms actually. The book on the left, the one with the white background, is about 1,100 pages long, and it contains more than 1,500 recommendations. And it's pretty easy to order, and it's not all that expensive, and it even comes in a PDF version for those of you who don't want to carry around big books. The version on the right with the gray cover is actually, you can find this free online. It's a little over 100 pages long, and it contains about 500 key recommendations. And what I think whatever else we may have done with this book, I think we broke down the idea that there is a magic silver bullet that you can use to address climate change. It just ain't so. Not even a carbon price is going to get all the changes that you need to get done in order to decarbonize the U.S. economy. There's a lot that needs to be done. And we identified hundreds of local options. Now, one of the things that we did, and Gene knows this, Gene Foschi, because we talked about this some months ago, is we put in our index, we included an index of recommendations by actor. And so you can go to the back of either one of these and find all the recommendations that apply to local governments without having to read through each and every chapter. You can find all those recommendations, and if you like, you can use that as a starting point. Next slide, please. So I'm just giving you a couple of examples here, and if you remember my slide previously on things that local governments can do that the federal government and even state governments are not terribly well positioned to do, I'm taking those exact same categories and I'm giving you examples of legal tools that can be employed in each of these. And as I say, I'm not going to go through all of these, but my students are writing about some of them this year. They're writing about mixed use zoning. The students have written about walkable communities in the past. Students have written about community gardens and reduced parking and electric charging stations. And so there's a lot of things that that can be done at the local level that are smack dab within the middle and the four corners of traditional local government authority and traditional local government responsibilities that do not involve any kind of stretch. Next slide, please. So where can you find these? And I think at this point I'm about done. Where you can find these is we have posted, and you can Google for any of these without having the link. But again, what I've got highlighted in blue is the hot link. The best ordinances from past classes I posted on the Widener's Sustainability Center website. There's another website since Professor Gerard and I finished our book and published it in early 2019. We've developed a website called Model Laws for Deep Decarbonization in the United States. And the idea is to take the individual recommendations in the book and translate them into model laws. And we have, and something like 24 law firms from around the country have agreed to contribute model laws to that. And we've got model laws recently posted on things like, for example, electric charging stations. It's a searchable website, and you can find lots and lots of model laws that could be employed at the local level for that. And then finally, a colleague of mine, Jonathan Rosenblum, has developed something called a Sustainable Development Code, which gives you ordinances on all kinds of topics, many related to climate change, that you can look at. And the nice thing about this is you can take a model ordinance and have a solicitor look at it without having the solicitor to draft the thing from scratch, and then to make whatever changes are appropriate for your particular jurisdiction. And so it gives you a little better starting point than a one-sentence recommendation. Next slide, please. I'm happy to help anybody who wants to answer questions about this. And so this is my contact information. I'm going to have to get off in just a couple of minutes, but I'd be happy to take a couple of questions. And again, I appreciate your time and interest, and I wish you all the best as you go about this important work.
Thank you very much, John. That was very informative. We do have, we've got lots of questions coming into the Q&A window, and I'm going to focus on one here that is, I think, specific to John that you could help us with before you leave. So one of our attendees agrees that, you know, local government has their actions matter. They have a role to play, but won't they need federal funding to be able to play that role? That we've already got municipalities are really strapped in their abilities to take on new initiatives. Local budgets are suffering, especially since COVID-19. So maybe speak a little bit about, you know, can local governments play the roles that you're describing without a large infusion of funding from the federal government? How do we move forward without that, or while we wait for that in a hopeful future?
Well, that's an extremely good question. I mean, one of the things that when I first started doing this project 6 or 7 years ago, when the students drafted these model ordinances for local governments, was precisely that question. I'm well aware that a lot of these townships in local governments, particularly in central Pennsylvania, are not particularly large. They're not well staffed. And so one of the things that I mean, so I would suggest that one thing that can be done is to look at the model ordinances that we've drafted, that others have drafted, because that's an effort to sort of save time and money on the part of local governments. So that's a starting point, and there's an increasing number of those. The greenhouse gas inventory is a different issue. And in municipalities that are so small that you know, the funding is an issue and you don't get help from the state. Another opportunity is just to take a kind of a ballpark view about what the major source of emissions tends to be, or what the cost-effective opportunities are for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. For instance, for a lot of local governments, the vehicle fleet is an energy consumer. The buildings are energy consumers, and simply doing energy efficiency, taking energy efficiency measures, more in purchasing more fuel efficient cars and that sort of thing, is another way for local governments to make some progress in the face of limited resources. I know that's not a complete answer, but I think those are steps toward a complete answer.
All right, thank you, John. So I know you're very short on time here. I'll ask you one more question for you to give a quick response to. One of our attendees wants to know whether municipalities should be looking at supporting increased residential density. So as part of, you know, as I reconsider zoning ordinances, how large of a role is that? Is that a good strategy? How large of a role might that play to increase residential densities as a climate change strategy?
Well, residential density is a good way to fight sprawl, and I get that. I think the mixed use zoning is a way to increase that sort of density. where you have maybe commercial properties, or excuse me, you have sort of commercial use on the first floor and the second and third floors. In a lot of downtown areas, you have residential uses. That's certainly one way to do that. The issue I think you have to pay attention to with density increases is some people like it and some don't. And you have to figure out a way to do it that that takes sort of some of the politics of that into consideration. And that really takes me back to a point Heidi made earlier about the importance of stakeholder participation. And so yeah, density increases are good. Just make sure you tailor them in a way that you get what you want without getting a lot of pushback on issues where you're just involving battles you really don't want to fight.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think stakeholder participation, having the community very involved in these activities so that nobody is surprised, nobody winds up, feeling that decisions are being made that haven't involved them and that are counter to their interests. So I think that's good advice. So I think we'll let you go with that, John, and thank you very much for your time. And we'll take you up on your offer to contact you with further questions.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. And thanks for the opportunity to participate in this. Good night, everybody. All
right. Okay, so continue to add your questions into the Q&A window, and there's a lot of them in there. We're not going to be able to answer all of them at the end, but we'll get to as many as we can. Our next speaker now is County Commissioner Jean Foschi. Jean?
Thank you, Neil, and I hope you can hear me. And I am not able to. Oh, there it is. Start my video. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So thank you to the Cumberland Conservation Collaborative, the South Mountain Partnership, the Center for Land Use and Sustainability at Shippensburg University, the Center for Sustainability at Dickinson College, the Borough of Carlisle, the Yellow Breeches Watershed Association, and our own Cumberland County Planning Commission. I am particularly grateful this evening to Elizabeth Grant, Stephanie Williams, and Kirk Stoner for the work they've done in seeing a vision for an environmentally conscious and responsible Cumberland County come to fruition as they got us through the process of completing a greenhouse gas inventory and preparing and implementing a resulting climate action plan. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention the work of Cumberland County's Conservation District team led by Carl Goshen. And I want everyone to know that my colleague, fellow Commissioner Vince DiFilippo, is participating with us this evening also. I am a freshman commissioner here in Cumberland County, having run and won in 2019. You're going to hear my clock. Sorry. I was endorsed by the Pennsylvania Sierra Club during my commissioner race, and also in 2018 when I ran for the State House in the 88th District. If you want to reach me, my email is jfoschi@ccpa.net. I believe that you can see the slide. And my direct dial is 717-240-6156. I met John Dernbach when I was running for commissioner, and I indeed have a copy of his 1,100-page book, Legal Pathways to Deep Decarbonization in the United States, and I have shared that with our planning and conservation departments because it really is chock full of practical ways for local government to make real strides in reducing carbon emissions. So I know we touched on this earlier. Why should counties and local governments conduct their own emission studies to create their own climate action plans? And really that reason is because no one else is going to do it. Cumberland County suffers from some of the worst air quality in the United States. In fact, some days it is worse than that in Beijing. We indeed are the Northeast transportation hub because of our direct routes to the Midwest, Florida, and New England. This fact will not change, and it will continue to bring transportation and air quality issues to the area. Even though county government is an instrumentality of our federal and state governments, we cannot wait for a higher power to move us to cleaner, cheaper energy because they are just not getting that job done. Sometimes I get discouraged when I hear people say things such as renewable energy is expensive. Cleaner, cheaper energy is good for the Cumberland County taxpayer. In 2005, Cumberland County's facility management team, under the direction of John Lopp, began an innovative energy-saving $1.9 million upgrade Program, wherein the county replaced equipment that had surpassed its usefulness with new energy efficient equipment. Within 7 years, the county received a complete payback of the initial $1.9 million investment and now reaps 100% of the monetary benefits through an energy management system. Saving energy is a way of life now at Cumberland County. It's easy. We did easy, reasonable things, such as the replacement of the boiler at the courthouse, low flow spigots and toilets, and remote computer access to HVA systems. And those things have lowered the county's greenhouse gas emissions. In 2018, Cumberland County was one of 23 government courthouses in the US and the only courthouse in Pennsylvania to receive the EPA Energy Star Award. It was the second year the award was received by Cumberland County, and it's my understanding that we are expecting to receive that award also in 2019. A 15-year monitoring of the 2005 countywide guaranteed energy savings project shows a total carbon reduction of 1,469 tons per year, a reduction of 18,004 pounds of sulfur dioxide per year, a reduction of 4,256 pounds of nitrogen dioxide per year, and 0.095 pounds of mercury per year. Overall, this is the equivalent of 25,834 tree seedlings grown for 10 years, or changing 59,354 incandescent lamps to LEDs, or taking 332 cars off the road each year, or reducing the electricity equivalent to 265 homes annually. So we really have made great strides in Cumberland County, and we're well on our way. We're committed to reducing our carbon footprint. We are currently exploring the possibility of a county solar farm to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. We have enrolled, as you heard, in the 2020 cohort of the local climate action plan process. Once Shippensburg and Dickinson universities have completed our greenhouse gas inventory, we will be able to use our countywide climate change task force to create a climate mitigation plan. This plan will be broader in scope than the county operational activities described earlier. It will also address the actions that can and should be taken to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on a countywide scale. We will review the data gathered and develop a set of policy recommendations and actions to reduce the major sources of emissions. We will be able to quantify the effects of proposed strategies and understand which actions will result in will have the greatest results. We're going to need good partners to do this work though. Fortunately, we already have some friends in climate change mitigation. Earlier today, you heard John Dernbach speak, and certainly Don Brown was mentioned, and you should know that both of those men live in Cumberland County. One of our partners, the Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation, also known as CADIC, of which the 3 county commissioners are board members, it will finish its strategic plan in the next month or so. And this plan is going to focus on a healthy economic development ecosystem, wherein people will want to live and work and play in Cumberland County, in part because of our commitment to a healthy environment. CADIC's executive director, Jamie Keener, has joined in on this Zoom meeting tonight. And Jamie is a regular at Clean Air Board meetings and is committed to keeping and bringing business partners to the area who will not only pay well, but are also partners in our good health. Health is one factor of the excellent quality of life our residents enjoy, and it is not only measurable on the individual level, the measure of the health of our environment is also significant, and nature often has its own solutions for some of our infrastructure issues and other concerns. I personally have always been intrigued by the idea of using plants to manage stormwater. Rain gardens and bioswales have multiple benefits. They preserve soil from erosion. They prevent pollution from entering our waterways, support pollinators, and they can be less expensive than other engineered solutions. Some MS4 municipalities are retrofitting storm basins to utilize this potential of plants. We have some great people in the county who can assist with this. We have our Penn State Master Watershed Stewards, we have Master Gardeners, and of course, our Conservation District Watershed Specialist. Our county's forests are also help to offset greenhouse gas emissions, and planting more trees can contribute to improved water quality, lower heating and cooling bills, and have so many other benefits. Land preserved as open space or less intensive uses can help mitigate some of the effects of intense industrial operations and transportation networks that may be contributing significantly to our carbon footprint overall. I think I remember a slide from the first presentation that talked about how in Pennsylvania, industry and transportation seem to be the source of a significant amount of our greenhouse gas emissions. The county is committed to farmland preservation to maintain a local connection to our food network and to maintain open space. The climate mitigation process can't stop at the county level, and we will be reliant on individuals, businesses, and municipal governments to implement the policies and recommendations that result from the action planning process. We need to build strong partners to bring climate mitigation into effect with cost-effective strategies that also promote our health and well-being. We are excited to see this process currently underway in the borough of Carlisle and hope more municipalities can join in the local action planning efforts in future years. In Cumberland County, we are looking for support from our community constituents to join the task force effort to review the greenhouse gas information and help craft sound and practical recommendations that will form the backbone of our climate action plan. If you are interested in joining this task force, you can email me directly, or you can contact the Cumberland County Planning Department at planning@ccpa.net. The work of the committee will begin in 2021. The possibilities are endless in Cumberland County, and I can't wait to see how our climate change task force develops. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Foschi. It's very heartening to hear the county taking this seriously and the commissioners being very interested in what's going on with climate change and actions that the county can take in partnership with others in the area. So now we're going to be going to the questions that we've been receiving from our attendees. One very basic question that I want to, I'll address this myself. This is, going back to, just sort of very basic information of one of our attendees wants to know, how does one measure a greenhouse gas? And could we give some specific examples of greenhouse gases? So, yeah, so in measuring greenhouse gas emissions, typically what is being done is not measuring gases themselves directly. What we do is we measure the activities that generate emissions of greenhouse gases. Primarily, and it was pointed out, I think, both by Heidi and by John, the biggest source of emissions for us is from energy use. And so we gather data on the amount of different kinds of energy that's being used, for natural gas, oil, coal. We're looking at electric power generation and the fuels that are being used to generate those. And from that information, we're able to calculate the emissions of greenhouse gases associated with that. So examples of the specific gases. Carbon dioxide would be the principal one, the largest one that we're looking at. Methane is another, and nitrous oxide. There are a number of other rare gases that are also of interest, but for practical purposes, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide are the main ones. So thank you for that question. It's good to get that sort of basic information out there. Heidi, I think we've got a couple of questions here that I think, I'll kind of combine here for you. And let's see if I can find them. One is about, let's see. Where is this? Yeah, so in terms of the role that members of the public might be able to play, we've got one attendee who's associated with a watershed organization and volunteers, and kind of what role can those sorts of organizations and volunteers play? And a slightly related question, we also have a question about from one attendee saying she didn't see her township listed in your slide of what townships are participating in the LCAP program. And so what can attendees do if their townships are not participating and they would like to see that happen?
Sure. So in regards to the latter question about a township that's not on there, I invite you to talk to your local township officials, see if they'd be interested in joining the local climate action program. I mean, we do intend to lead another formal cohort starting next August, but I mentioned on my last slide about our ICLEI subscription. So you can get access to their greenhouse gas inventory tool and technical assistance from ICLEI, as well as all of the resources for the training webinars that are right on our webpage. So that's a way to definitely get involved. And then as for the question about the watershed volunteer, I mean, watersheds are crucial here. We're going to be seeing these flooding impacts locally, and as Jean mentioned, it's just green infrastructure is crucial, and riparian buffers. So that individual, it would be awesome if you joined the climate change task force that Jean mentioned, and that is in the process of being formed. They will start meeting for sure in January of next year as Cumberland County goes through its climate action planning process. So we need stakeholders from all different sectors. So water, waste, transportation, environmental justice communities, the whole gamut. It's an all hands on deck approach.
All right, thank you, Heidi. So we had a couple of different comments and questions about transportation, and some specifically focusing on issues of interstates and highways in our region. Maybe if Heidi and Jean maybe comment a bit about sort of, how much of an impact is that highway infrastructure having on emissions, and what are some strategies by which a county can be dealing with highway emissions where these are interstates that are not within our jurisdiction to really control directly. What are the things that we can be doing that can address emissions related to transportation broadly, but then maybe specifically about the transportation on the interstate highways and state highways?
So I'll go ahead and start, and then Heidi, boy, if you jump in, that would be great. So there, one of the biggest things that I hear from people is about truck traffic. It's about emissions. It's about air quality. And because, and this is a fact, this is a reality, and we might not like the answer, but it is unfortunately a piece of the reality of where we live. We are the Northeast transportation hub. You can go from Cumberland County to Maine very quickly, from Cumberland County to Florida very quickly, from Cumberland County to Chicago very quickly. That our geography will not change. We can't do anything about that. So as we are moving forward, we can do a lot of things. One is that we could work on enforcing the no idling law that I know that is on the books, but no one ever goes out to any of the warehouses and says, hey, turn your truck off, right? That's something that we could be working on. I'm not sure that that's a county thing to work on, but it's something that we could be working on. One of the things that I talked about earlier is the Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation and its commitment to a healthy economic ecosystem. And as a member of the board there, and I know that the strategic plan is going to roll out, we have put very, very serious thought into what kind of businesses do we want to attract in Cumberland County? Because we do live in this valley, where all of this air gets trapped, and we do suffer for many days of air pollution. So as a county and having our county partners focusing on what do we really want our life to be like here, I think that's a good step to moving us forward. I can see a question here that says, isn't the proliferation of giant warehouses around Carlisle with their prevalence of transportation networks counterproductive to the reduction of greenhouse gases? Should we be limiting this type of land use? And I'm gonna do my best to answer that question. So I'm gonna go back to the fact that we live in the Northeast Transportation Hub, and we can't change that. And then I'm going to add to this piece that as a county, we really and truly are looking at what kind of businesses do we want to have here. But I want to also balance this out with this other fact. I know that FedEx is going to put a new location in right off of 81, and they are going to bring 900 good paying jobs in. So right now we're kind of stuck in this world where we live in the transportation hub and we have people here that need to have really good jobs. And so we have to satisfy that need while we move forward with renewable energy and with clean energy. And so I hope everyone understands that this is not an overnight fix. And I know that no one, everyone wants this done quickly, and I do too. But that's something that we're living with. As to should we be limiting this type of land use, I don't know that legally, if we can. I would actually throw that question out to the Cumberland County Planning Commission, because they will have a far better answer to that than I will. I hope that helped.
Yes, thank you, Jean.
Okay.
Heidi, do you want to add anything on that?
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay, yes. I want to touch on that latter question first, actually, about all of the distribution warehouses in the Cumberland Valley. Some of those are certifying as green buildings. They are Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design certified buildings, which means they're more energy efficient. They are more water efficient. They use more rapidly renewable materials and green building materials in them. So that's great. There are a few out there in the area. And then also just invite you to explore the opportunity of somehow using all that roof space for solar, all that flat roof space. I know I've done some hiking on the Kittatinny Ridge and just looking down in Carlisle at all those roofs. I mean, number one, making sure they're high reflectivity so that, they're not black or a dark color that's going to soak up the sun's rays and then thereby add to the cooling load of that building and boost electricity use. And then in regards to alternative transportation, what we can do in the area. So DEP, my office does have, I believe the solicitation period closed this year, but we have what's called the FAST Act corridor grants that are available. And those grants are designed to support the installation of alternative fuel infrastructure along Pennsylvania's interstate highway corridor. So I-81, heart of the Cumberland Valley, FAST Act corridor grants are a great candidate in this area for that kind of grant. Also, we have charging rebates for level 2 electric vehicle chargers that local governments and businesses are able to apply for. We have individual rebates that homeowners, that residents can get for purchasing either all electric vehicles like the Tesla, or myself. I drive, now a dinosaur, but I drive a Chevy Volt, which is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. It operates initially on all electric. I typically get 60 miles on my EV range, and then it seamlessly switches over to gas. So all of my daily commutes to and from work, including errands in pre-COVID times, were on all electric. So after 100,000 miles of driving, I can say that I have averaged 70 miles per gallon with my PHEV. And I'm really proud of it. So you can get, again, a rebate, individuals. And then also our alternative fuels incentive grants, or AFIG is the acronym. Those are currently open through December 11th. Local governments and businesses are eligible to apply for those grants, and those grants are for the purchase of alternative fuel vehicles in your fleets. So those are some incentives.
All right, that's really good, Heidi. And so this, tying this back to the question earlier about, what can we do at county and local levels when, the financing issue is such a big issue. So I think some of the things that have been talked about here are examples of, there are programs in place, but one of the challenges local governments and citizens face is knowing, well, what are rebates are available? What kinds of information is out there? So one of the things that we can be doing at the local government level or the county level is just, doing a really good job of searching out, learning about these different programs and making them more widely known, more accessible to our residents. There's a great program on it's PA Commuter Services, offers some great programs to assist people with alternative transportation, but I find that few of my neighbors know about it. Jean, one of the questions we have is what are you hearing from constituents about climate change? Is this something that you hear about from them? Do they care about it? What are they saying? And then maybe also comment a little bit about whether the other county commissioners are you working together on this issue?
Sure. And before I do that, I really want to, I see a question in the chat, and it's such a good question, and I want to address it.
All right.
So what should our children do? Your children do? Move, right? And I have two children. I have a 10-year-old and I have a 14-year-old. And I would like to create a Cumberland County where they can live here for the rest of their lives if they so choose, where they don't have to move because they don't like the air quality. It's one of the things that is so important to me. I moved here because I like living here. I like the fact that I get this nice rural environment, and I can be in New York City quickly. I can be in Baltimore quickly. I can be in Philly quickly. So the answer is not move, but I will tell you this. So, and I'll get into the next answer was, what do constituents say? In order to get this done, we really do need help. Okay, so first I will tell you that the other two commissioners that I work with, the three of us are committed to doing things to reduce carbon emissions, to mitigating climate change. Okay, Commissioner DiFilippo is here, and he talks about farmland preservation and open space and all of those things that keep Cumberland County what we want it to be. The three of us are very, very, very committed to mitigating climate change. But this is what I hear, and I alluded to this in the speech that I gave, and it disturbs me tremendously. I hear from so many people that we cannot afford to move away from fossil fuels. We cannot afford to move away from those huge trucks because people are afraid. They don't see what could happen. They see that immediate effect of, if we don't have fossil fuels anymore, my personal economy suffers. If I don't have a job anymore, my personal economy suffers. And that's a big thing for people. And I'd like to get the message out that says, it doesn't have to be one way or the other, right? I know that we have an emergency. And of course, the group that is here tonight understands that we definitely are living in a world of a climate change emergency. But the people that I talk with, unless they're a part of this group, right? There's not always an urgency on that. And quite frankly, some of them just don't believe it. So I think as we put our message out, it's important to help people understand that it does not have to be one or the other. We can have good jobs. We can keep these fossil fuels that keep us kind of feeling good, right? As we transition to new things, to new and better, fantastic things. And so I hope that the people here will take this call for help seriously. When we all said, we need people on this climate task force. We need people to help us to develop policies. It is tremendously important. I hope that helped, and I hope I answered the question, Neil.
Yeah,
Okay.
very much so. All right, so we're down to the last couple of minutes here. So I'll make one announcement and then I'll ask one more question. So there was a question about whether the presentations and the recording will be available. We'll make these available. They'll probably be on the county planning department's website, but everybody who registered will get an email with information about where to find the recording and the presentations. And maybe as a last question, I'd be interested to hear from Heidi and Jean, what gives you hope?
Sorry, I was taking a second there to unmute. What gives me hope? The local climate action program, in the process of recruiting students for this program. Last year, I did my recruitment for the students in the summertime, okay? July, it was July when I had to start recruiting because that was when I got approval for the federal government funding. We don't find out till like end of June. So I was like, oh, I was so worried that I was not going to be able to find enough students to participate. And when I was trying to recruit in the summertime, lo and behold, I had to turn away. I can't even tell you. I mean, maybe 24 students, maybe more. It was a lot. These students care. The younger generation, the future generation, they care. And that gives me hope. And I experienced that firsthand when I was trying to recruit students. And it was fabulous. I mean, it was a great problem to have. I felt bad turning away students, but it was a great problem to have. And they give me hope.
All right, thank you. Jean?
So I was going to start with younger people give me a tremendous amount of hope, particularly on climate change initiatives. I think the thing that gives me the most hope about this is that here we are as a group sitting down in what I would consider to be a very conservative area of Pennsylvania, and look at all of the people that are here that are concerned and that have great ideas and that will help to move us forward. That gives me hope, a tremendous amount of hope. Like, you know, I'll go back to John Dernbach and Don Brown again. I don't know, and there's Joel Hicks. You know, we have these fabulous people with incredible amounts of knowledge and expertise that live right here in Cumberland County that are not afraid to share that. I see Dave Mayer in the chat, and he's putting these things in the chat about, okay, go here and look at this idea. The other thing that gives me hope is that people vote, and your vote is your power. And if you really want things to change and change quickly, then we need to change our elected officials and put people into office who really and truly do want to get this done and get it done fast. And for the person who sent the question about what is going on at exit 24, if you would not mind shooting me an email, and I will answer you tomorrow. Okay, I do think it might be the FedEx, but I don't know for sure, and I don't want to give you a wrong answer tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jean, and thank you, everybody. So we've got a lot of questions we don't have time to get to. And so I think what we'll try to do is capture the questions that are in the Q&A window and share those with the speakers and other organizers. And we'll figure out, you know, are there ways that we can get some responses back to you. If you did not register in advance for this event, you should probably shoot an email to let's see, who to? Let's see, maybe if to the South.
Want them to send it to me?
Yeah.
Yes, send it to the South Mountain Partnership and get your pens ready or your phones out. The email address is KHE, S as in Sam, S as in Sam, at AppalachianTrail.org. And that information can also be looked up on our website at southmountainpartnership.org.
All right, great. Thank you, Katie. So I'll just share in closing here. Well, one, it's great to have had such a large, good group of participants in this. Thank you to all of our speakers this evening. Thanks to everybody for all the questions that you posed to us. Our next forum is on December 8th at 7 p.m. The focus of that forum will be getting into more details of what can you do at, say, the borough township level. Joel Hicks is playing a large role in organizing that, and we'll be using the case of the borough of Carlisle as our case study, our example of how to approach these kinds of issues. So thank you all very much for joining us this evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.